welcome to the May 2018 Alliance of Independent Authors Advanced Self-Publishing Salon with me, Joanna Penn, and Orna Ross. Hi, Orna.
Hi, Joanna. Hi, everyone.
And we're back.
Here we are again.
Yeah, and the month just flies by. I can't believe we're like, what, a third of the year through already. It's crazy. So
almost May.
It is. Today's theme is, are we moving towards self-publishing 3.0? And we're going to talk about what is that anyway, and what does it mean? But first of all, some updates. First of all, the Alliance of Independent Authors. Orna, what's been going on with ALLi?
Oh, we had a busy April. It was amazing. April and October look set to be our busy months of the year, busiest, because that's when we do our live events. And April was, of course, the London Book Fair for anybody who was asleep through April in the publishing world. I think London Book Fair goes from strength to strength as a fair. It really has a very clear idea of its own identity, and I think it is the most author-friendly of the book fairs, without a doubt. So for the first time, we took an actual stand at the fair, and that was amazing. It was wonderful. 3 days of meeting face-to-face with lots of authors and talking to everybody, from people who were just considering and starting out, people who came to the trade fair to find an agent, who went away saying, no, I don't want an agent. I want to self-publish, and so on. So yeah, it was really great. We launched also our new member magazine, The Indie Author, and a 32-page magazine, which we will now be doing quarterly. We used to do a monthly update for our members, and we do a weekly roundup of our self-publishing advice blog. But we felt we needed something more meaty that people could kind of get their teeth into. And we're also circulating that magazine through author associations to writers all over the world. So that was exciting. That was the first issue was released. And I don't even have a print copy left. They all went.
I'm just looking.
Somebody took my copy. So I can't show it to you.
I've got one. Yes, I have one here.
You have yours.
There it is.
There it is. So that will go to our members actually tomorrow. And we also launched Blockchain for Books campaign, which has been...
It's the white paper. I have everything. I'm so prepared.
You're so prepared. And yeah, so that went really, really well. Also, in terms of starting a conversation about something that is quite in the future, as I said before here, the Alliance could just kind of sit back and watch and see, but we have decided to advocate. Partly because, not for any particular company or any particular way of doing it, because it's very, very early days and nothing is mature enough yet to say, jump on and do that. Though some members have, and one of our members became #1 on the blockchain, on our partner members blockchain at the fair, Suki Jutla, her book about becoming an entrepreneur. Which in a way was a bit of a show kind of thing by the service Publica. But I mean, it is also true that history was made and the first blockchain for books bestseller was born. So well done, Suki, for that. So yeah, it was all round a very exciting fair. You had a good time too, I think.
Yes, I did 2 days, and I've just done a massive roundup on my podcast, the Creative Penn podcast, so people can listen to that. It took me about 10 days to kind of think through everything I'd learned, and I went to some fantastic sessions, mobile storytelling with China literature and Wattpad, which was very, very exciting. And really just, it's always good to, I think it makes me feel both tiny, because you feel like this tiny, tiny fish in this huge pond. And the other thing I think is really important is you realize that most of publishing book sales are not on Amazon. Like, we don't even see the bulk of what goes on in publishing, as you know, these wholesaling things that go on, bulk sales, and so many things going on around the fair that make you realize that you're in this huge industry. And you know, so your art is everything, but your art is nothing. It's one of those moments where you have to juggle in your brain. And that, I think that's very good for us. It's good to look at the scale sometimes. But the other thing that happened is we did have a conference that was on at the same time, didn't we? So just tell people about that, because they can still get the replays.
Yeah, replays are still available at selfpublishingadviceconference.com. We always, after our live events, one of the things we do at the fair and kind of wherever we go is do a recording so we can make it available to everybody who can't be there in person. And of course, that's one of the joys of digital. So yeah, we had live sessions from the fair at on the conference. We did our usual 24 sessions over 24 hours, lots of stuff on marketing a book, particularly lots of different and diverse topics from all sorts of great people. So yeah, do check that out because in a sense we bring the fair to everybody else, and also bring the sort of education and research and stuff that isn't yet at the fair, because self-publishing, even though London is more author-centric than any other book fair, author's presence there is tiny and in an annex up at the back, far away from the main action on the main floor. It doesn't matter in the same way that, we are, that's exactly where we are located within the industry. But for a reader buying a book, it doesn't care what end of the industry you came out of, as long as you've written a good book and they've enjoyed it. So, and I don't see any of that as particularly important. So yeah.
So and of course that was the book fair and that was busy industry stuff, but we are still writers and we are still writing and publishing, and I am about an hour away, because we had this call scheduled at a specific time. I'm about an hour away, once we're done, for finishing my line edits on how to write non-fiction, so I'm going to finish that this evening.
Oh, you must have loved taking this call, Jo.
No, I really needed a break. I've been going so hard on it. I mean, it's a bit like renovating a house. Line edits can take a lot longer than you expect, and I thought, it's non-fiction, it won't take any. Oh my goodness, it's been a lot of work, and it's another. These are those books that I write and I think, I just write down everything I know, and it's ended up like 70,000 words again, so it's a big book, but I'm very pleased with it, and I'm trying to release all formats together on the 31st of May, ebook, print, audiobook, and a multimedia course. So there you go, that's my plans. So what about you? What have you been writing and publishing this month?
Yeah, that's brilliant, because I'm also thinking about this bringing it together thing. So I'm doing a proper launch period where I'm actually going to do some press. I also want to bring out audio, print, and ebook together, and I'm also going to bring out 3 separate books and a box set at the same time. Fantastic. So that's the plan, and that will be at the beginning of October. And it's interesting. I've spoken to a few people. We're going to be talking about self-publishing 3.0 and the whole thing of direct selling and so on. And I'm talking to a few selected people about some bulk sales as well, which is something I've never considered before. So really, for the first time in a long time, taking publishing very, very seriously. And it's almost like because I think confidence has changed and people's view of self-publishing has changed. My own ability to think about myself as a product has improved from the last time that I kind of went out there in this way. It's interesting and it's very enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to kind of reporting back more as well than I have had time to really in the past 5 years. I feel like I have time now to concentrate more on my own process and helping other people to kind of, just shining a light on that for whatever value it might have for others. So, yeah, that's interesting. And to balance that, I'm also, and I probably, this won't come to anything, or I probably will say no. Like you, I get a lot of offers from publishers of various kinds to publish the work, and it's usually just a kind of a straight no. But I am talking to a very interesting, very small digital publisher of fiction only about maybe doing a contract with them to publish my fiction, some of it. I wouldn't go for it all, and may, as I said, end up going for nothing. But when it came to looking at what I'm doing on one side and then what is happening and your ability to reach across all your books at all times, and this publisher, because they're small, new, niche, and very interesting, their contract is very much more flexible than the usual, that it would actually it could make a lot of sense for both of us, because they will put the time and energy and effort into marketing that, there's only so much time to go around. So the reason I'm bringing it up, because as I said, it may not even come to anything, is because I think it's important. There was a conversation I had at the fair about being an indie author and what that meant, and its alliance with self-publishing. And of course it means self-publishing, but it also means making any contract, any deal that's good for your books, as long as you retain the level of control that you and creative freedom that is essential to you. Nothing's off the table. So it doesn't mean that you only self-publish at all times on every project. You consider each project on its merits. So I just wanted to bring it up in relation to what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting, and a lot of indie authors who have some success are approached by various people, and I think the empowerment side of it is the most important thing. It's that really weighing it up and seeing the pros and cons, and also not just for now, because it's interesting you say that, and obviously when you go with any kind of publishing contract, you will get a smaller percentage, but you hope that they will do more marketing, and I think that's probably true for a certain amount of time. But if you fast forward 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, are they still going to care about your book? So what I'd like to see is more of the same as the foreign rights, which is a term of license, and because I think that a publisher could care for your book for maybe 5 years or 7 years, but I just can't see them caring unless you're a mega bestseller.
Absolutely. You always have to limit the term. I mean, you go into the negotiation trying to make the term as short as possible. They go in trying to make it as long as possible. Problem is that authors have not acted in their own interest and have just taken publisher contracts and signed them without doing the negotiation that a publisher expects. So yes, and that's one of the reasons I would even be considering this, is because the contract is so flexible around term and conditions and everything. Yeah,
cool. Okay, so quick news before we move into the today's topic. So there was amusingly, back in January I think it was, this leak of the 50% royalty which came up, and I said at the time, that is not a mistake, that is a piece of code that they released too early. You can't just have a mistake in programming. The mistake was letting it go live, and a few people saw this 50%, and there was much discussion of what it is, and now we know, because Amazon has released, and this is beta, invite only, it's called Great on Kindle, and it is a non-fiction only program at the moment with 50% royalty, but with the positive side of no delivery cost, which for many non-fiction writers, and also no cap on the upper limit. So you could price a book at $19.99, for example, and it could be full of images, and you would still get $9.98 or whatever it is, 50%. So this is very interesting. My two feelings are, I think this is a great idea for those types of books, and that's my first feeling. My second feeling is, why the hell can't they do this for more stuff? And my third feeling is, I don't like the branding. I don't like Great on Kindle. I think that to me says, these are the good books, these are the great books, and everything else is not great, which is wrong. And what I can see is that the Great on Kindle will become a new brand for 50% royalty. This is my prediction, completely my prediction, my thoughts, nothing to back that up. But I Great on Kindle is not a non-fiction thing, so that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's interesting that that's your prediction, because I think that is a direction. I think what was interesting to me was the reason for starting there with non-fiction, and I think Amazon's research is showing very much that non-fiction readers are still, fiction has moved primarily to ebook, but non-fiction readers still really like print, and there are still some things you can do with a print book, a non-fiction book, that does make it feel more comfortable. So I think that's a big part of why this has started there. And the Great on Kindle thing, I mean, you're back to the gatekeeper, back to the curator. It's exactly what Amazon, it seems to go against everything that Amazon stands for in terms of the reader being the decider. But yeah, there you are. They're not going to change it now, I don't think.
No, I think it will only be expanded. And someone asked me if I would go into it. I definitely would consider it, but I don't have any. I would love the 50% royalty to be about getting into Kindle Unlimited. So I would take a 50% royalty for some books. You know, you'd make the choice per book, blah blah blah. But to get into Kindle Unlimited and not have to be exclusive, that would be brilliant, because there are a lot of readers there I'd like to reach, but there you go. Okay, so the other interesting piece of news is that Kobo and French partners Fnac, who are, the biggest bookstore really in France, right, are partnering with telco Orange to distribute audiobooks and more ebooks. So this is really interesting because this is a mobile, telecom mobile service, right? So this, and I don't think it is this, but this could open it up to mobile payments where there's no difference between what people are just doing on their phone and buying stuff without even noticing, which is what China literature were talking about. So that's interesting. But any thoughts on this one?
Well, I think it's great, and Kobo are fantastic. You know, the way such a small company manages to punch way, and by that I mean Kobo Writing Life, manages to punch way above its weight by making these very strategic partnerships. It does that exceedingly well. And yeah, I think what you're talking about, that convergence, it's not there in this deal, but I think that's where we're heading. And I think that will be a very good thing for self-publishing authors, and it will get people used to that direct purchase for books. That is all important. Yeah.
Fascinating. Okay, so today's topic, are we moving towards self-publishing 3.0? And I know some people listening are going, but what was 1.0 and 2.0? So Orna, this is your kind of phraseology. So explain, what was 1.0, what's 2.0, and what do we see with 3.0?
Yeah, 1.0 is simple. It was the end of the 1990s. It was desktop publishing. It was the first time that you didn't need a massive, big, enormous printing press to produce books. And it was revolutionary at the time. Lots of authors jumped in and filled their car boots up with books and, went off around the country. It just became affordable to publish small books in small quantities, and it became possible for authors to do. And self-publishers had lots of very successful mail order businesses, and there was a whole load of activity that wasn't very well documented at the time. It wasn't really considered as self-publishing because it was Dan Poynter, I think, who coined the self-publishing phrase, but it only began to be used much later. So self-publishing 2.0 was that much later, 2008, 10 years ago now, when we got Kindle. So with first e-reader technology with Sony Reader was the first one, but it was bringing it together with an online store. Those two things together gave us self-publishing 2.0, and of course authors took it in huge numbers, as we know. And self-publishing 3.0 is essentially about authors thinking of themselves as the main event rather than thinking of other services as the main event in their business, and thinking about how can I actually get more readers directly, where I get the email. The problem with publishing through the services, obviously you get discoverability that you wouldn't get on your own, but you lose an awful lot, and you lose control. You have no data whatsoever about your readers. All of that remains in their hands. And it also, I think, because of because so much attention goes to the services, it stops writers from thinking more creatively and more directly about their readers and how to reach them. And so I think blockchain coming, but not just that, all of these kind of like mobile pay and all of what is becoming possible through technology means that it is easier, and it's going to be easier and easier for us to reach people in that way, but only if we start thinking about it as an option. And so it's very much, I think, about us realizing that this is important, that no other service or website should be getting more of our time and effort than our own. And it isn't about I'm giving up all the services and I'm just going to publish direct. Of course not. But it is about, are you set up? Do you even have that option on your website? Do you even think about that? If not, why not? Beginning to ask those kinds of questions, I think, is really important.
And it's interesting because I've been selling direct, courses and audios and books and things really since as soon as I went online in 2008 when I built the Creative Penn. And, later on there were some issues in terms of sales tax with the EU. 2014, that came in, became a bit of an issue. And tax is definitely one of those things that can be an issue unless you use some of these intermediaries. And there are plenty of options for helping people deal with that. But even just to mention the word tax means that people have to have a business mindset. You have to be taking control and understand your publishing world as a business. And you and I talk about this a lot, I've been banging the drum for years. But interestingly, you put in the blockchain white paper this line, which I've quoted in my blog as well, from Orna. Many authors crave attention more than money and overvalue their work emotionally while undervaluing it commercially. And that, I think, is brilliant, and it totally nails why authors struggle with things like selling direct, because there is no recognition, no ranking, nobody saying, oh look, you're number one, whatever. So how do you think we can deal with this issue?
I think, we've seen a massive increase in author confidence in the last, particularly 2 years. And, and it's one of those things that seems to me to be growing exponentially. So it's one of the reasons I love the London Book Fair trip, is because we launched there 6 years ago. And every year you go, you get a different sort of temperature in the author community. And I think we weren't ready for this before. The very idea that you can even choose yourself and, decide to publish yourself is still brand new to so many people. But there are enough authors now who are in a position where they can and are beginning, and authors who would never have thought of themselves as business people, myself included, are coming round to understanding that actually the first day you sell a book, you've become a business person by default, whether you like it or not. You are now embroiled in things like tax and so on. But it's taking time, and that's understandable. You don't reverse 5 centuries of conditioning in a decade. But I think this decade we're coming into now, I think with the rise in author confidence, it's time for us to start thinking about some of this stuff, because if you're dependent on a trade publisher, or if you're dependent on one self-publishing outlet, you are not independent in either of those scenarios, really. And true independence is built by having a diversity of different income streams. But it also surely begins with your own self and your reader, and at least having that thought. So at the moment, those authors who go direct, it wouldn't be a major part of their income, generally speaking, in most cases. And only a minority have even got around to thinking about direct. And by direct, I don't just mean I sell a book directly on my website. I'm also thinking about things like patronage and membership sites and, all the various ways in which you can actually just move closer to your reader and become more central. And there are other services that you need to bring in as well. But I suppose what I'm talking about is not just assuming that there is only one way to self-publish. There are lots and lots of ways to self-publish.
I agree. And I think so you mentioned a couple of ways there, but let's just go through what ways are authors already selling direct. And it's interesting, you mentioned Dan Poynter, who I met before he died, right?
So did I.
Yeah.
What a gentleman.
Just a lovely, lovely man. And I met him at a speakers event, because non-fiction authors who are mainly speakers and then do a book as part of their speaking platform, they have done back of the room sales and basically selling direct for years. I mean, really I would say that speakers are probably, done this originally. So that's sort of the back of the room individually, but also the bulk sales, again, generally non-fiction authors selling books in bulk, maybe to companies. When I was researching how to write non-fiction, I was looking at some of the famous books around this, and Who Moved My Cheese was a really big one that basically got licensed all over American companies and just sold, who even knows how many copies that book sold, and it's still a bestseller, but would have made so much more money with the direct sales to these big companies. So those are two really big things. You mentioned subscription and Patreon. What are your thoughts on those? Any examples?
Yeah, gosh, examples. I'm hopeless at it off the top of my head, but I think it is. I've only
hint,
just.
It's in the notes.
Sorry?
Hint is in the notes.
Then I'll have to move my notes over a bit. Lindsay Broker has just come to mind. There are people who I have just decided to have a look at Patreon, so I'm really interested, and I've been going around just looking at all the different people, not just writers. I think this is a really important thing to note. That we can learn more, I think, from people in other creative fields and in tech fields and so on, than we can learn from authors who are more traditionally minded, and to certainly those who have the conventional business model of selling to a trade publisher. So, it's really interesting to go around Patreon and look at the different ways in which people offer what they do, and the different things that they're offering, and who succeeds and who doesn't, and all of that. And I think that's a really inspiring and interesting thing that I should have done it years ago. So I'm all about it right now. You can just sell your books. You can just put a PayPal button on your website. Of course, you will then have to bring people to that landing page. Doing that in and of itself is not enough, but not doing that at all is also a decision. And if you're not, why not? Okay, if you're Amazon exclusive, you can't. But, if you're not, why haven't you kind of thought about that?
I do have an issue with just the PayPal button because of sales tax in different places. So I would recommend looking at services. I use Selz, selz.com. There's also PayHip. You can do Shopify, which also does physical products. There are lots of third-party sales platforms for enabling direct sales that will help you either manage the sales tax. So, for example, you can opt out, even if you're British, you can opt out of selling to the EU and thus avoid digital VAT, which is
you can do that with PayPal now as well.
Right,
they have upped their game a lot, and they have 2 or 3 different options. It used to be a lot cruder. They can geo-block now as well, and they can do various things. I haven't tried any of the other services, and have found PayPal sufficient to needs, but sometimes it takes a conversation. You need to talk to them about what your needs are, and they can help you.
But I do think, just circling back to the distributors, and we mentioned Kobo, it's really interesting. I have quite a few readers in sub-Saharan Africa who they don't even have access to Amazon. They can't use PayPal, and yet they are able to get books on Kobo, which is fascinating. And I think this is a really good point because we are global. The Alliance is a global organization, and many authors who are not, in the big Western digital, sort of world, can't actually use these tools. There are, even people in the Alliance who publish on Amazon and still have to get paid by check, which is just crazy. Or, they can't have direct bank transfer. So it's I think we're kind of straddling this world where we can see this future, like I mentioned, China literature, where readers are paying micro payments per page on their cell phones, and Google's next billion internet users are mobile first. I mean, this is happening. And then we've also got this kind of other side, which is a lot of authors haven't even considered, sort of the questions they're asking at a basic level one. So what I like about what you're saying is trying to span this time in the middle. So I was delighted when Selz came along, and also now BookFunnel integrates with Selz. So I used to have this awful problem where I would sell an ebook to someone and then they would have to sideload it onto whatever device they were doing, and everyone had a different device and it was a nightmare. And then Damon started bookfunnel.com. So now you can use Selz, which then integrates to BookFunnel, and they get their ebook as seamlessly as if they had bought it on one of these other places. So these tools are becoming more available, just potentially not for everyone. So it definitely gives you more of a global perspective, I think.
Yes, and they will spread. It's a matter of time. And of course, it's brilliant to have services like Kobo, and I must mention Publish Drive as well, which reaches into places that Amazon doesn't reach. We had an interesting presentation at London Book Fair from Publish Drive, who were looking at some particular authors and just how much of their revenue came from outside of Amazon. And when you move out of the UK and the US, that becomes really, really noticeable, So yeah.
Just coming back to Patreon, as you said, there are lots of different ideas. Lindsay Baroka, fantasy author, actually releases her books as a Patreon reward before she loads them up to Kindle, and then she does do an exclusive period with Kindle. So she puts them on Patreon for her fans, because she's been wide for a long time, but now is doing these different release strategies. So I think that's a really interesting method, because you're not going against their terms and conditions, because you haven't published it yet. So you're actually, putting it out as a reward to your fans, and then you're publishing it. So and
very clever.
It is very clever. And I think this early, I support Christine Catherine Rush's blog on Patreon, and you just get it early. So I get her post like a day or two early, and then other people get it when it's on the blog, and you still feel like, oh, that's cool, I got that early. I have my Patreon for the podcast. I do an extra Q&A every month. So I think that's really interesting. But that's just, one of the big the big elephant in the room, I guess, is the selling direct, is you do have to drive the traffic. You have to concentrate on your personal brand, your website, and really take control, as you said. And for some people that's really scary, but again, mentioning China Literature coming into the West with their 100 million new books, there's a lot of content in the world. I think we've all noticed that, and to me the only way of standing out is to be you and attract people based on what you're sharing and your angle on the world. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we talked about personal branding in an earlier session. I think it was the month before last. I think it's key, and that sense of taking ownership and having to know how to attract traffic. And I think the day of discoverability through Amazon and so on, as more and more content comes in, discoverability is not something that's really happening. People are attracting their readers to Amazon, and they're paying dearly in lots of cases with lots of advertising and stuff to bring people to their Amazon page. And if we were actually to put that same amount of time, effort, money and so on into attracting people to our own landing page, we would get so much more out of that. So key to it is, as you say, getting over the fact that it's scary. Yeah, it's scary. This whole thing is scary.
And fun. It's scary and fun.
Yes, it wouldn't be fun if it wasn't scary, people. Yes, it is scary. That level of kind of stepping up, and taking hold. There are two sides to every author. There's the person who does that, and then there's the person who sits in the room and wants to be left alone and not to talk to anybody. And integrating those two sides of ourselves is very much what an indie author has to do. And I think do it for ourselves. Again, it's that idea of slowly over time building something, a real asset that has real value, rather than, as I said, spending loads of money, I think, to get your ranking this week, but you're
this
not
hour.
Left with
Yeah.
You're not left with anything. Whereas sell less this week at home on your own site, but you're left with emails, direct connection, and all sorts of other ways to sell to sell your words in different sorts of ways than just the obvious. It's about getting creative. It's about really, I guess, embracing all the potential here, or more of it anyway, rather than just doing what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, and it's funny because it just makes me think of, I'm coming up to my 10th anniversary on the Creative Penn, and when I wanted to leave my job, the whole thing I wanted to do was I was like, why am I spending my time and my energy and my life building someone else's brand, building someone else's business? And one of the main decisions for me, actively choosing to go indie, and I think it's really important, it was never a second choice for me, it was the first choice, was freedom. And freedom being the value that I hold most dear, and circling back to independence, and we are the Alliance of Independent Authors, and this is a mindset as well as actual practical things that we do every day. So I'm very excited. I think we're looking at, as you say, 3.0. We're only just moving into it. We could say we're at 2.9, right?
Yeah, okay.
We're moving into this, but I definitely think, like, if we're still having these conversations in 2028, things better be different.
I think they will be different. And I would love to, as a side note, if there are people out there, because the very nature of indies who work this way is there could be somebody doing an amazing job that we just don't know about. So please identify yourself so that we can share your success with other people so that they can emulate what you're doing and so on. This is a world of co-opetition, not competition, and together we are stronger. I'm quite certain there are people, just as in the old days, there were indies who ran very successful mail order businesses that were completely anonymous, little ads in the paper, and off they went. I'm quite certain there are people out there doing things that we don't know about. So please identify yourselves. Fantastic.
Right, so we'll be back for the June, the June session in a month's time. What's your focus for the next month, Orna?
I'm on this publishing jag, and I'm actually had to, and it's something I think we'll have as our theme next time, the team, the assistants who help you to make things happen. So I've had to do a major rejig. So I'm in a kind of a training period so that I can kind of really focus in on publishing for the next little while. So just doing publishing differently, but also documenting my own process, because I didn't have time to document the growth of the Alliance when it started. It just kind of took off. And so I'm kind of going back now and working on the self-publishing advice. Our successful self-publishing book 1 will finally be finished, because I think it has been waiting for this time, this moment, this self-publishing 3.0. It, to me, completes the circle. It never felt complete before.
There we go. Fantastic. And I will be going hard on how to write nonfiction, and so I hope to be announcing that. And I have promised myself, because I'm trying to be better at rewarding myself for achieving things this year, I've promised myself a book research trip to Madrid. So
fantastic.
To tie into my next Arcane novel. So I'm really excited about that. So I think this is important too, is we're not always working. We do have to reward ourselves for a job well done. So thank you very much, Orna, and thanks everyone. Happy writing, happy publishing. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Jo.